As a marketing consultant, one of the most common questions I get asked is where or how should a business spend their money to promote or advertise either products or services? In the old days, you'd look at newspapers and letterbox drops and, all the traditional sort of methods, even TV or radio advertising, things like that. These days, most of the money gets spent on digital because everybody's on their mobile phone, people are on their computers, less people watching TV, etc., etc. For a lot of small business owners, the most effective way is obviously digital advertising, and you can do that in different ways. There's meta ads, there's Google search ads, and obviously all the websites that currently operate, majority of them will have some form of advertising package that they will sell to either put content on their website, to have display banners, to show promotional information in different areas, to email to the database, etc. And so a few weeks ago, I was asked to look at a particular website in Australia. And one of the first questions, well, obviously was traffic and, how many people visit certain areas or whatever. They didn't have a media kit. They didn't provide any detail behind anything. And so the only thing we got was via email. And so, for example, in this response, we got told that organic traffic hovers around 20,000 people per month. But that data was as of January. Now we're talking about June, so it's like 6 months old. So therefore, straight away, first question is, has that gone up, gone down? Is that consistent? Even where does that come from organically? So is it in Australia or is it other countries? And so without that information, it makes it really hard to make a decision because if they say to you it's going to cost $5,000 to run a campaign, you have no idea whether the traffic they get or the audience they serve is going to be beneficial to you. And so questioning continued because that website in particular, we wanted an ad to only show in certain areas. They weren't able to do that, unfortunately, which meant that there could have potentially been a lot of wastage. And so straight away, you're not able to target the right people, and you don't even know if they're getting the right people to their website to even be suitable for you. And even after further questioning, at the end of the day, they said there was not going to be any further updates made and they're not updating any of the information until the new financial year. In this day and age, data is so critical to present and make decisions with because it's live, it's happening every second of the day. And so to not only give a figure that's 6 months old, but then say that nothing's going to be provided until next financial year, which is July, another month away, um, when I received that email, it didn't quite make sense. And so, in the end, we decided not to advertise. And so some business owners then say, well, I received a media kit or I received like a proposal. And a lot of those will have a lot of nice figures and big information, but what does that actually mean? And so here, for example, this is a case that I wrote a while ago on my website where, this particular website was presenting, they had uniques of 55,000. I don't know what that means. I would assume it's unique visitors. They had impressions of 85,000, but impressions of what? Because impressions are normally related to advertising. So are they saying that their advertising generated 85,000 and what does that actually mean? Is it per week, per month, per day, per year? There's nothing here to actually help quantify anything. Same with the rest of the figures. The reality in this case was I had an Australian client that sold to Australian consumers. Doing a bit more investigation, this actual website, majority, 40% of their visitors were from America. And so it actually didn't make sense to advertise with them. And what made this worse was that even the American visitors weren't spending a lot of time on the site. It was less than 30 seconds. And the bounce rate was really high. What that meant was most people were coming to that website looking at one piece of content and leaving. And so straight away it begs the question, what's the quality of the audience and how engaged are they that this particular media outlet was generating? And so if they're asking for 5, 10, 15, 20 grand, using big numbers and high level numbers, does it actually make sense for you? Coming back to the example I just showed you on the email, the only way that you can kind of check or have some sort of litmus test or whatever is to try and use some of the third party tools. But the challenge with these are most of them will only really show organic traffic. They won't show all the other sources or they can guess, but it's not the same as having direct information out of Google Analytics. And so it still means you're not going to get an accurate picture. So here, for example, the quote or the figure I got was 20,000 per month. what this is showing is that slowly but steadily, this website's been declining in traffic for a long period of time. And so, is the 20,000 accurate? Don't know. Is this trend accurate? Not really sure. Because again, this is not directly coming from the business. It's a external tool that's making an estimate or a guess. What you can use these tools for is to challenge information and to get them to try and justify or prove some of the figures that they're putting forward. This was SEMrush, similar web. It's another tool, similar thing. It was showing a decline as well. It was showing that there's some other websites that are potentially bigger or getting more traffic. Ahrefs, again, it was showing a relatively low number too. And so when you put multiple pieces together, it helps, I guess, you know, question the information that's getting put forward, because there's no way to prove it unless you actually see their Google Analytics data. Now, most media outlets probably won't share it. The sales team don't have access to it. They probably won't be allowed to share it. And so it means you're putting a lot of trust or faith in whatever they're telling you. The challenge with this is that if their audience is not in Australia and it's not highly engaged, or it doesn't visit sections or pages of the website related to your product or service, whatever you pay for may never actually get seen, depending on how it's executed, especially if it's content. And so a more recent example was, a client of mine wanting to advertise for vehicles. Now, this website, perfect audience, mainly male, etc., etc., so it's a good fit. But here again, there's some really big numbers being thrown around, which seem awesome. And so, the next step or the next question has to then start being, where is that audience? How long do they spend on the website? Where do they come from? How does it get to that website? So if you're planning on doing an activity where you're going to create content maybe and you're hoping that it'll get found with organic search, you need to understand whether or not that audience is going to be the right fit and in the right location for it to be valuable. Even if you're paying for display advertising and banners and so forth on a website like this, you want to understand what proportion is going to be shown to the people that you're trying to sell to, so that you can establish whether or not it's going to be good value. And so again, these are all high level numbers. Maybe in discussions, maybe in a media kit, they go through a lot more detail, but it's important to look beyond the numbers to understand, what's happening. And again, if we apply a SEMrush tool, it's showing 130,000, it's showing a decline. And if you go a step further, you can actually look and see what do they actually rank for? What do they get found for organically? So you can get a feel for whether or not the type of things that they are getting found for have got anything related to, your business. Maybe you're just paying for them to create content, then you can use for your own purposes. Maybe that content will get created and then get promoted and advertised. So there's different ways you can get traffic to the things that you're paying to promote. But it's really important to have a really clear strategy, but also understand whether or not those big numbers mean anything that's actually, valuable and useful for your business or your product or service. Again, you can use different tools to try and get information. Here, what Ahrefs is saying is that most of the traffic is from America, and most of that is to do with memes and hairstyles and things like that. So there is this whole level of detail that you can get into that even the media outlet can provide to give you a really good understanding as to whether it's going to be suitable or not for you, or how your execution would need to be done so that it does get the right traffic for what you're trying to achieve. Another website quite a few years ago that I did some work for and did an audit on. Again, here's another good example where there's some high level numbers that are shared in a media kit, but here it's showing us a slight decline. Again, this is a good example of where some of these third-party tools are not necessarily accurate because the actual data is very different. So here, in the last 90 days, there's been about 1,000 people in Australia that visit this website, whereas SEMrush was showing, a decline in less than 500. So it's really important. You can use some of the tools to get an idea. You can use some of these tools to start asking some questions, but ultimately they're not going to be 100% accurate as opposed to getting the real data. Getting the real data from the media outlet might be impossible, but it's worth asking the question because at the end of the day, you could be spending thousands of dollars not really knowing whether any of that traffic is going to be suitable for you. And as you can see here, this website has content that's ranking all around the world. If you're an Australian business, it's really only that proportion of about 1,000 people is going to be important to you, and the rest is just superfluous. So that's a good example of just some of the intricacies with taking a high level numbers from a media kit or from like a beautiful summary of a web page like this from a media outlet, and then starting to really think about whether the traffic they get, where it comes from, what countries they're located in, is it relevant to you, and then what methodology has to be applied to get the right audience to the content or to the advertising or to the things you're going to be creating and trying to get them to promote. Without doing that, it could mean that a lot of money gets spent. Reports might get generated to say that you had like thousands of views, but you have no idea where that was from or what country it was, etc. And it could end up being a whole heap of waste of money.